From a single voice in Abuja, Nigeria, a conviction echoes. I am here today because the fate of one man represents the fate of millions. From the streets of Nigeria's capital to the financial hearts of Western nations, a movement demanding freedom for one man has sparked protests across continents, putting a global spotlight on Nigeria. This is the story of how the detention of Nnamdi Kanu, a controversial and charismatic leader, ignited a worldwide cry for justice. It's forcing a tough conversation about history, identity, and the very future of Africa's most populous nation. We'll explore the massive scale of these demonstrations and uncover why Nnamdi Kanu's fate has become an international issue. To understand the protests, you first have to understand the man at their center. Nnamdi Kanu is the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, or IPOB. He's a British Nigerian activist who, through his fiery broadcasts on Radio Biafra, reawakened a dream many thought had died decades ago: the creation of an independent state of Biafra. The original Republic of Biafra was a secessionist state that broke away from Nigeria in 1967. It was primarily for the Igbo ethnic group, who felt marginalized and persecuted. This declaration sparked the brutal Nigerian Civil War, a conflict that lasted 3 years, and resulted in the deaths of over 1 million people, many from starvation. The war ended in 1970 with Biafra's surrender, but the grievances never really went away. Fast forward to 2012, when Nnamdi Kanu founded IPOB. He argued that the same issues that led to the war, political alienation, ethnic marginalization, and economic neglect of the southeastern region, were still rampant. His message resonated deeply with a new generation of Igbo youths who felt disconnected from the Nigerian state. But his activism came with a price. The Nigerian government views IPOB as a terrorist organization, and Kanu as a threat to national unity. He was first arrested in 2015 on charges of treasonable felony and terrorism. After being granted bail, he fled the country, only to be brought back to Nigeria in June 2021 under controversial circumstances his lawyers describe as an extraordinary rendition, or kidnapping, from Kenya. Since then, he has been in the custody of Nigeria's Department of State Services. The legal battle has been a roller coaster. A Nigerian court of appeal actually acquitted him in 2022, but the government refused to release him. That decision was later overturned by the Supreme Court in December 2023, which ordered his trial to continue. It's this prolonged detention, despite court rulings and international outcry, that has become the flashpoint for a global movement. The anger over Kanu's detention hasn't been silent. It has poured onto the streets, and nowhere has it been more volatile than in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Protests demanding his release have become a familiar and often chaotic scene. On October 20, 2025, human rights activist Omoyele Sowore led a Free Nnamdi Kanu Now protest in Abuja. The plan was to march peacefully and make their voices heard, but the demonstration quickly turned tense. Protesters were met with a wall of security forces. According to Sowore, police fired tear gas and even live bullets into the crowds, creating widespread panic. One protester's shaky phone footage captured people running and shouting as clouds of tear gas filled the air. "We are not allowed to protest in this country again. Look at what is going on. Police are shooting at protesters, innocent protesters that didn't carry guns or anything." By the end of the day, dozens of people had been arrested, including journalists, Kanu's own lawyer, Aloy Ejimakor, and Kanu's younger brother. Sowore and others were detained and spent several days in Kuje prison before being granted bail. The police defended their actions, stating that the protesters were attempting to access sensitive government locations in violation of a court order. But for the demonstrators, the heavy-handed response was just more proof of what they were protesting: a government that uses force to silence dissent. The clashes in Abuja laid bare the deep, raw divisions in Nigeria over Kanu's case and everything he represents. This was never just a Nigerian problem. Nnamdi Kanu's British citizenship meant his case was always going to have an international dimension. As tensions flared in Abuja, the embers of protest were glowing brightly across the world. From London to New York, from Washington, D.C., to cities across Europe and Asia, the Nigerian diaspora mobilized. They gathered in front of Nigerian embassies and consulates, holding signs and chanting, demanding that the world pay attention. The Release Nnamdi Kanu Now campaign went viral, transforming a domestic legal battle into a global human rights cause. Supporters argue that Kanu's detention is politically motivated, a tool to crush a popular movement for self-determination. Groups like the American Veterans of Igbo Descent have publicly condemned the UK government for its perceived silence and complicity in the detention of one of its own citizens. They point to a 2022 ruling from the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which declared Kanu's detention illegal and called for his immediate release and compensation. This international pressure is critical. It elevates the conflict beyond Nigeria's borders, framing it as a test of international law. Protests in foreign capitals ensure the story isn't just covered by local Nigerian news, but by global media outlets, putting the Nigerian government's actions under an uncomfortable microscope. To dismiss this as a movement about one man is to miss the point entirely. For his millions of followers, Nnamdi Kanu is more than a leader. He's a symbol. He is the living embodiment of a grievance that has festered for over 50 years. The struggle for Biafra is rooted in the feeling among many Igbo people that they have been systematically marginalized since the end of the Civil War. They point to a lack of federal investment in the southeast, political alienation, and a feeling of being treated as second-class citizens in their own country. When Kanu speaks of restoring Biafra, he's tapping into this deep well of historical pain and modern-day frustration. A hypothetical protester in London might say, "My parents survived the war. They told me stories of starvation and loss. When I look at Nigeria today, I see the same injustices they fought against." Kanu gives us a voice. An activist in New York might explain, "This isn't just about the Igbo. It's about the right of any people to determine their own future." When a government responds to calls for a referendum with arrests and bullets, it shows it is ruling by fear, not consent. The Nigerian government and its supporters, however, see it very differently. They view Kanu's rhetoric as dangerous, inflammatory, and a direct threat to the sovereignty and unity of the nation. They point to the violence that has plagued the southeast, some of which has been linked to IPOB, as proof that the movement is not entirely peaceful. For them, holding Kanu is necessary to prevent the country from fracturing into another civil war. The case is also complicated by opponents of the protest, including some victims of separatist violence, who argue against his release. This is the core of the conflict. One side, freedom fighter, is another side, terrorist. One side's call for self-determination is another's call for treason. Today, the situation is a tense standoff. Nnamdi Kanu remains in detention, locked in a complex legal battle. In a dramatic twist, he dismissed his entire legal team in late October 2025 and declared he would represent himself. He has since insisted that there are no valid charges against him. On October 31, 2025, he filed a fresh motion asking the court to strike out all charges, arguing they are based on repealed or non-existent laws. It's a risky legal gamble that has the court, and the country, waiting to see what comes next. Meanwhile, the protests continue. Activist Omoyele Sowore, upon his release from prison, has remained defiant, a symbol of the broader struggle for civil liberties in Nigeria. The government remains firm, deploying heavy security and using the courts to restrict demonstrations, signaling it has no intention of backing down. The world is watching. Human rights groups are calling for a review of Kanu's detention. The United Nations has issued urgent appeals to the Nigerian government, warning against the violation of his rights. Many analysts and civil society groups argue that the continued detention is a major obstacle to peace in the southeast, fueling a cycle of mistrust and instability. The story of Nnamdi Kanu is a complex, evolving issue with deep historical roots and profound implications. The facts, the protests, and the legal battles are ongoing. To grasp what's at stake, it's vital to stay informed. If you believe these conversations are important, please share this to help spread awareness. The massive protests for Nnamdi Kanu are about more than one man. They're a reflection of Nigeria's unresolved past and its uncertain future. They represent the explosive intersection of memory, marginalization, and a demand for justice that refuses to be silenced. The movement has forced a difficult conversation onto the global stage about national identity, the right to dissent, and the rule of law. Whether you see Nnamdi Kanu as a visionary or a demagogue, his detention has become a powerful symbol. The fight for his freedom has morphed into a broader struggle for the soul of Nigeria itself. a test of whether a nation of immense diversity can ever achieve a unity based not on force, but on fairness, equity, and justice for all its people. The world is waiting for an answer.